Welcome to another episode of Breaking into Cybersecurity, where we talk to individuals who have been in the cybersecurity field for a while and they want to share their journey of how they broke in to inspire the next generation. Today we have Daniel who's joining us. Daniel, tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you into cybersecurity.
Thanks, Christoph. Thanks for having me. My name is Dan Ayala. I'm the managing partner for a fractional CISO company called Socratic. And I've been in the field for about 32 years now. I started in the early mid 90s when I was still an undergrad and created a company, oddly, to connect medical billing networks for doctors' offices who didn't want to pay $1,000 a month for a T1 line. And those of you of a certain age will remember what a T1 line is and what they cost. And so we started playing with this new thing called the internet. I had gotten the internet as part of university in the early 90s and started to get to play with it as a medium. We had dial up. And so, this networking world, I was a CS major. This networking world opened up things like the need for firewalls and VPNs, and I found I loved it. And so I think it was all downhill from there, being able to take networks and security and blend them together, because that was a big piece of what security was at the time. I had that company. I built that company for 4 years and then sold it and then went in-house. It was the late 90s. I got engaged and I thought I need a real job. And so I went in-house to do network security for network infrastructure and security for a pharma company. Did that for a few years, and then I started making the rounds across all of the things that would become the InfoSec field,
Well,
including
in regards to education, a lot of folks kind of wonder what educational background did folks have? Do folks need to have? And that's always one of the questions. So, what degree did you have, or did you get along the way, or certifications did you need to get along the way as you grew in your career?
yeah, so again, it's a different answer than things today because there wasn't a field at the time. My degree actually is in history, mostly because it was the first one that hit. When I went to the University of Wisconsin, I was taking a lot of courses across a lot of different things. I'm really insistent on the idea of a Renaissance education and people being very broad and understanding lots of topics. I think it's helped me a lot in both life and in my career, be understanding how we got here on a lot of things, even if they're not directly related. But my actual degree is in history. At the time, it didn't matter what your degree was in, it was getting a degree. And there was no such thing as a cybersecurity degree. And CS was like 40 people in the class at the time. It is not the juggernaut that it is today inside universities, where I heard recently that the University of Michigan, 10% of all students are in the CS department across all of the university. All 10% are part of CS. As far as degrees, I got my CISSP in 2002. It wasn't for any purpose other than it was a relatively new certification at the time, and I played with it. I got it. But when people ask me about degrees versus education, degrees versus certifications, it's a very sticky topic as a hiring manager, because I think I want people with curiosity over all of it and the experience. A certification that's just a certification because you went through a boot camp is of very little use to me. I want you to have played with it. I want you to understand it. And if that comes without a certification, then so be it.
Okay, that makes sense. So now you're, I guess, maybe 8 years into your career. You've gone through a couple companies. What's the next pivot that you do? And are you strategic in that pivot, or is it more opportunistic? How are you in your mid-career in deciding what comes next?
Well, I think you have to be somewhat strategic or stupid to quit your job 3 days after 9/11 and go to a new one, which is what I did. No, I've always been a big thinker. I always think broadly. And so the time in pharma was about larger architectural concepts. And when I went into banking in the early 2001, it was to take on a manager role, to take on my first leadership role, and to move to a different topic. I like to see new things. I like to take and expand my scope of what I worked on. And so in that change, when I went to ABN AMRO Bank, a large Dutch bank at the time, actually a global bank at the time, it was to run a vulnerability management and program and build out the first unified security operations center. So this is a global SOC for a global bank. And then also add on over time things like security architecture and strategy, add on, securing desktop builds, things like that, much more technical items to build out this suite of services around a secure infrastructure. Each of these is a purposeful move, either to look at a new field or to look at like a new industry or to look at a new topic within the infosec space.
So just thinking of each of these modules that you're adding on to your program, they all require a significant amount of knowledge in the space to, even as a manager, to be able to develop the programmatics and to ensure that the team's doing what you're supposed to be doing. How did you, in your career, keep up with what needed to be done and learn at the same time? What was your approach to drinking from the fire hose and keeping up with technology?
I'm both a reader and a tinkerer. The reader part, I read voraciously on every topic that was out there. Now we were into the era where the internet was much more prevalent. As we were, as an industry, we're sharing more information with each other. It was part of the time when the first financial services ISAC was being set up. And so in all of these, it was about information sharing. I was part of first the form of incident response and security teams at the time, colleagues sharing information with each other, which is, by the way, still exactly the way I get information today. It's peers talking to peers about what's going on and what they see and what's good and what's not good. Because it was a little more gravel road rather than some of the current paved roads we have today, we didn't have products for everything. So we had to mess around with things. We had to try new things. And if it failed, it failed. If we were no worse off for having played around and gotten, down a dead end and having to come back than we would be had we not tried at all. And sometimes, we really succeeded. We found new ways, new techniques of doing things, and we shared them with the community. And we found new efficiencies in monitoring and detection, and we shared them with the industry. Occasionally, it was products, which is going to be a fundamental for me. The idea that products don't solve problems, people solve problems, and that we use technology to support it, and we should be using basic technology as much as possible before we start going on to whiz bang things.
Today, everyone wants to be AI enabled, but that could lead down a very unsecure rabbit hole for organizations if they want to allow folks to use the technology and play around with the technology before they make it enterprise ready and fully deployed. So, how do we kind of enable that balance of the freedom to play and the freedom to innovate?
It's a very tricky topic. And the fundamental is that it is not the AI that I struggle with. It's the AI providers and my trust in them to protect and use the data that goes into it in the way that they claim they will. I'm in security. I'm a cynic. I have trust issues. I think we all do. As a result, I'm actually quite keen on the things that are happening in the space, but I think they need to be run in isolated worlds. I think that the idea of spinning up something in your own Amazon instance on Bedrock so that you can see it, know what's happening with the data, know that it's controlled and in your own space and not being shared, used, or exposed in another way. And I think I recommend to product companies that I talk to do the same thing, to allow me to do that. Unfortunately, there's this proliferation of $45 cheap solutions with AI in them using commercial AI models and the data going back into those models. And those are where we have to put our foot down, especially when you consider the type of data going into them. And when it's InfoSec data, it's a little bit more scary that
Mhm.
what happens if that data comes out the other end. But I'm really excited by what I see. But I do all this under the lens of one of the next steps in my career was to go, into the research space, into academia. I was the chief information security officer for Michigan State University. I worked at Michigan, home of the University of Michigan, but really it's just the Big Ten is great. But in that time, in working with researchers, you get the understanding of, I guess, and layer that on with the world of pharma, which is
Hmm.
with a very cautious world because of product efficacy and patient
Hmm.
safety. And so I think about these things in the world of let's test, let's use the information we get out of them as guidance, but it's not gospel. It is not.
Hmm.
I think we are better as an industry when we listen to tools like that. We take it under advisement and we provide the full context of what we know as human practitioners about the environment that it goes in. Will we get to a time of full automation? Probably at some point, but I don't think we're there yet.
Kind of going back to your career,
Yeah.
what were some of the pain points or struggles transitioning from the technical manager to the business leader manager that you needed to be a CISO?
That I couldn't just come home and just write the solution myself.
Yes,
Also,
that you weren't allowed to have your hands on the keyboard anymore.
which, which unfortunately, the person who suffers most in that is my poor wife and my son, which means if I can't mess around with tech at work, I'm going to mess around with tech at home. And the poor network at home is always in a state of change because I need to do something technical. Yeah, I mean, it's the fact that I couldn't, that, we have teams, we have experts, and the tech has, I'll be quite honest, a lot of the tech, the fundamentals of the tech are there, but the ability to execute on them, I have ceded that over my career now to people who are technical experts in those areas. And so I depend on them. And it became actually easier to depend on them once I had lost a bit of my technical chops. By the way, I can still play, but it's just not it's not what it was when I was younger. I think that was the hardest thing. The other was to stop thinking about security. Again, I came up in a world where security was a no man. No, we just said no to things. And it was for your own protection and we were doing it genuinely because we thought it was the right thing. But we've now moved into a world of business enablement where security is actually a tentpole. So I've been in product companies and software product companies for the past 10 years now. It's been a pivot because now these are features people buy on. So now we can use it, we can shift and make it, what do customers need from security? Well, how can we make revenue happen faster? How can we build trust? And that's actually been a nice replacement for me for the technical.
So it shifts from a no to a how can we get this done?
Absolutely. The answer, the coming from Chicago, the second city improv idea of you never say no, you say yes, and you continue the conversation, but pivot it a little bit. How do we get them to yes? And we've always found ways to get them to yes once you take on this thinking. It may be the other idea that the other concept was, when I was at ABN AMRO in the banking world, it wasn't a security function. It was a technology risk management function. And when you put that lens on, and I've had the benefit now of 25 years of thinking like this, that when you put the lens of this is risk, and risk
Mhm.
exists on a continuum, and the only perfectly secure thing is one that's closed, turned off, locked in a closet, no data, no network, no nothing. And that's not very useful. So anything we do has to come off that edge. Now we just have to figure out together, and this is the idea that security is not beholden to the business. We are part of the business, especially now more than ever. And we collectively inform on risks and figure out where along that continuum we as a company want to live.
Now you've become a CISO. What's your career like now? And what do you do to keep up with the ever changing technology, the AI coming out, and the business going, hey, I want that shiny tool, and not saying no to them? and pivoting to that. Yes, and we can help you do it in this way.
Yes, and if we do this, what will the headline look like on the front page of the Wall Street Journal? Is this something that if this shows up on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, will it ruin our company? Will it ruin this project? Will it ruin our organization? Will it ruin our customers? All of those kinds of things are part of the conversation.
Oh,
The
so you do that risk assessment right there.
first question, and you put it in terms. The other element is the so what. Like we as technologists are really good at quantifying. I stopped 484 million vulnerabilities yesterday. And then you come
So
to somebody who is about revenue and who's about EBITDA, and they say, so what? What does that mean? Does that mean I can open up in 4 new markets? Does that mean I can free up liquid capital? Does it mean I can raise a price by 20%? Does it mean I can cut costs? The so what? And so you start with the so what. The so what of this question ends with what is the impact to our business if it goes wrong? And then you start to move your way back to what levers are we willing to pull in this to make it happen, and what levers are too far.
so now that you've had that conversation, what are some of the interesting technologies that you are willing to implement, feel are capable of being implemented? And then on the pivot side, how do we prepare the talent pool of this current generation that's in the workforce and the next generation that will have to adapt and be ready for this type of technology? Because it wasn't like when we grew up, what we had to do to be ready for this.
When we grew up, we could open a computer and replace a part. And I think that a lot, the fact that it wasn't all glued together let us be curious in a way that is much harder to do today if you're just starting out. Also, the consequences are way more dire. Somebody came in and they changed all the password, then you reset them. Yeah.
Yep.
Now there's a lot more at stake. And a lot more well put together adversaries. The bad
Hmm.
actors are way better at this than they were. So as far as technologies that are interesting, I do like where we're going with knowledge management. My wife is a librarian and knowledge manager, and so the idea of understanding your knowledge and being able to get at it very quickly. And I make the tongue in cheek joke that modern LLMs really are just a really robust search engine.
Hmm.
I That is a great way to be using them. Put your
Yeah.
institutional knowledge in and get information out. Don't execute automatically. I know we like to do this. Don't necessarily in all cases. Put the risk assessment on it. If it's something that's low level, if it's something that's an automated task, write a report, publish a report, whatever it is, great, go for it. But I also
Hmm.
feel the same thing about, people who are new to the industry who may not understand it, but are generating a report by hand as well. You
Yeah, exactly.
always have to take into context the generator of whatever it is you're reading. I think we have an opportunity to collect data and process it at speed that we never have been able to do, which will allow us to gain insights. But it's really just a bigger version of the big data movement, bigger, faster, and it's a bigger version of some of the early aggregation work that we did in security 20 years ago, where we're aggregating our logs for the first time in Snort. Things like that, I think we're evolving on that space. I think the ability to tie your systems together, the idea of where MCP is and where it's going is really quite interesting. But I also encourage everybody to get back to basics. Get back to the basics, understand your environments, understand how your data flows. This is a great opportunity
Mm,
for
yes, yes,
professionals to work with your data protection professionals. And
yes.
by the way, these two fields are way more similar than they are different.
Have data flow diagrams. Like, I don't know how many times I've asked architects or even system owners, like, do you have a data flow diagram? Do you know where all your data is coming from? Do you know where it's being stored? Do you know where it's going, how it's being processed, the data lineage of your data, all of that? And it's like, no. And it's like, pulling teeth trying to get it created, but this could be done when you're developing the application from scratch because you have to say, okay, this is being connected to this. And there you go. Like in the beginning, you can do it. And as it changes, you can just adjust it. And now with everything as code, you can now use code to go find how those data objects connect and do that. So your comment about MCP, even better. Like now we can use data code at scale and MCP servers that have skills to be able to say, okay, well, maybe I don't have the skill to learn how to do that. Let me go out, an agent go out, learn how to do that, and then come back and then do that after. And that's a perfectly acceptable skill. But this kind of ties us back to our bedrock comment earlier in how do we control the agents and the data flow of what those models or what those agents are doing? And I have an interesting question for you. Are we about to have a pendulum swing back to on premise so that we could control our AI in a better way versus letting it be potentially leaked out by all the AI vendors that we've been using?
I think the pendulum is swinging for a couple of reasons. One, first and foremost is cost. If you look at Amazon costs, I use Amazon as almost like Kleenex. It is the referential to all public services. But so I think people's costs are going up, the utility is going up. Yes, the service is going up. Like we have lots of different built-in components, and the lock-in is pretty heavy. People have made a lot of products that are dependent upon Amazon or Azure or GCP native services. So the move isn't easy, but I think the costs are going up. I'll point you to 37 Signals. David Heinemeier Hansen, who's the DHH is what he goes by, has recently been chronicling their move. They make a product called Basecamp, chronicling their move back from the cloud on premise to the tune of $10 million for one set of products in savings. So I think, and we come back to the so what, it's always about dollars first, right? So the dollars. Yes, I do think the control is going to be a factor, but I think the control in this case comes a little bit different. So yes, we are looking to put more onto on premise. I think the idea that Amazon can control or can protect infrastructures better than a bunch of separate in-house security organizations probably still remains true because they can do it at scale. But it's not about the infrastructure, it's about the applications, it's about how you deploy the infrastructure. And that is still dependent upon companies in both cases, regardless of the cases. And
Yeah, I think the fact that now everyone wants to use agents, it's no longer about AWS or Azure or GCP protecting your cloud infrastructure because now you're bringing in an API from Claude, from whoever, and they're piercing a hole in your infrastructure to allow that API call to pull your data out to process it and send it back in. And it's what they do with your data that becomes the concern. And it then becomes public data by the time they're processing it. So you've lost control of it at that point. And if they've got breached or leaked or something like that, you've lost that full control. And most of these models or providers don't allow you to pick up and take their new invention and put it in your bedrock to run. They want to sell you their service and you have to pay them to do it, and they won't let you take their model and put it in your environment.
we what I'd love to see providers do more is guarantee or establish their product under their control in an environment that is not the shared cloud environment that everyone and their mother puts their commercial into. Roll it
Mm,
into their own bedrock. I don't necessarily need it to just be in my world that I manage and own. I'm willing to take a middle ground for, again, just to continue to grow people's exposure and skills in this. There are topic areas I'm perfectly happy putting in there are not out in the same thing that everyone and their mother can start writing code injection or sorry, prompt injection attacks against to try and exfiltrate because it's in a common data store. Like it's those kind of middle grounds I think that help keep us moving.
The public cloud and the enterprise cloud version of it, which is a little more protected, a
Yeah.
little more segregated, kind of provides that middle ground for you.
Holo.
Yes, managed colos goes back to the old days of shared space again. What's old is new again.
Just to jump on your question real quick, your comment about MCP and some of the data being sent out and sent back in. Again, I think security practitioners need to think about this, and we're already down this road. If I suspect you and a non-zero number of viewers of this podcast already quiver when it comes to the way that things like Microsoft Teams and things with stores access data or want to access data, Slack, same thing. In this world, if that keeps you up at night, this is going to send you to the corner, gently rocking and weeping, as now you're sending real data out into these environments. It's not that it can't and shouldn't be done. It just needs to be done in a managed way and not just because some person on the team decided to click through and start connecting it up.
Oh no, I'm totally for it. Like I've helped organizations create chatbots that bring together knowledge sources and then use Teams as a method to connect to that so that they can more easily interact with that knowledge source and have a conversation with it versus, oh, they need to go outside of their workflow, go to a separate website to interact with it. You're less likely to use it if it's outside of their normal workflow. But if
Yep.
it's within Teams, oh, yeah, I can ask it. Those extra clicks are so much friction on the business that people don't realize they're not going to do that.
And they're going to go build their own thing
Yeah.
outside of your environment and take the data out without you knowing it. You want to give them the path you want it to go so it doesn't run through the town of Rockridge and destroy it.
So, what advice would you have for the next generation to prepare themselves to be the ideal candidate for that first or second job if you were their hiring manager to stand out from the crowd?
Show me that you're curious. Show me that you play. It doesn't take a lot to play. You can run this stuff first of all, there's still a world of capture the flags. There's still a world of things that don't require an enrollment fee or that don't give you a test at the other end. And through conversation, you should be able to demonstrate what you got out of it. I bring a Socratic method to conversations, to interviews, to everything. Ask my poor son. And, and I think that's a great way for hiring managers to get a good understanding of what it is you've done. I don't need to see a program. I think that degrees as a result of continuing your learning are great. I think certifications to confirm what you've genuinely learned through your curiosity and through your experience is really good, but I wouldn't go seek those things out as a way to try to prove yourself on the front end. Take a job. One of the things that we did in my last role at Dotmatics, which has now recently been acquired, and it was our security operations center was purposely an entry level role. We expected people to come in with absolutely no security experience. We wanted people who
Amazing.
were career changers. We wanted people who had some technology experience. They had to have technology experience. Like you can't just say this is a mop and now this is a computer and how do I turn it on? We would train you, we would teach you. And the idea was that we would grow and 50% we expect will leave and go do other things, and 50% we'd hope would stay in the organization. Like this is you build a program for these things. Find those programs because those are going to be geared to you. If you're a little more mature, if you've done a little bit more security work already, be able to talk about it. And I don't mean in bragging terms. I mean, what did I learn from this? Put it in business terms. Put it in the so what. Like this is interesting. I did this. I learned this. What's an outcome I didn't know before I started that I now know and really went aha and I appreciate. Like those are the kind of insights that tell me that you're the curious person, you're the learning person. And I want people who can learn. I don't necessarily want people that know it all already because it's all going to change in 6 weeks. The technologies are immaterial. The concepts are fundamental, but the curiosity is truly the bedrock.
Daniel, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insights. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.